explaining the Chrollo Hisoka fight. Not only the best fight in Hunter x Hunter, but one of the best fights across all of shonen manga. So this fight is incredibly complex, and that's entirely due to how Chrollo's ability works and the specific game plan that he enacted to defeat Hisoka. So the way we're going to do this is I'm not going to give a play-by-play, panel-by-panel breakdown of everything that happens. Instead, I'm just going to explain in depth exactly how all of his abilities work and how he tied them together to ensure himself victory. Okay, now before we begin, just a very brief recap of the events that led to this fight. Basically, Hisoka has been wanting to fight Chrollo for as long as he can remember, right? But Kurapika got in the way of that when he used his abilities to remove Chrollo's nin. So Hisoka tracked down a nin exorcist on Greed Island and then brought that exorcist to Chrollo to basically restore him to normal. Now, you'd think that at this point they fought, but they actually didn't, and that's because Chrollo's strategy started right then and there. He actually ran away from Hisoka and refused to fight him until he had everything perfectly lined up the way he wanted, and that included going to collect various stolen abilities from people that he would use against Hisoka, but not only that, to make sure that all of the circumstances were best aligned to aid him, including having the eventual fight be at Heaven's Arena as a Floor Masters bout. And Chrollo did all of this to ensure his victory, which just showcases his intellect. He was not going to take this fight until he knew he could win it. Like, he even tells Hisoka to his face, "I am 100% sure that I will win." Alright, so now let's talk about the fight itself, starting with each of their abilities, and Hisoka is rather straightforward. He is a transmuter whose aura has the properties of both rubber and, you guessed it, gum. Now, even though that is simple, he's able to use it with a lot of utility, right? Primarily by shaping his aura and, using it as a weapon. He can fling stuff around, but he can also make himself very mobile by, extending his aura, attaching it to a wall, and then like pulling himself over there like Spider-Man, basically. And that's primarily what Hisoka does in this battle. It's nothing too fancy or complicated. He also has the ability called texture surprise, which allows him to basically change the texture of an item, but he doesn't use that in this fight. Now, Chrollo, on the other hand, is a specialist, and his ability is far more complicated. And I'm going to attempt to keep this as simple as I can for this explanation, but his ability is called Skill Hunter, and it's this book here. And essentially what that is a collection of all of the other nin abilities that he's stolen from people. So he basically has a whole stable of abilities that he's able to access through this book. But it has some limitations, primarily the fact that he has to have this book out and open to the specific page of an ability that he wants to use, meaning he can, under normal circumstances, only use one stolen ability at a time, and he has to have one of his hands occupied at all times, holding open the book. However, he created another ability to go in tandem with this in order to give him more utility, and that is his bookmark, which you can see here. And so how he can use this is he can place the bookmark in the book at a certain ability and then close the book and still have access to that ability, thus freeing up both of his hands. However, he can also use it in another way. He can bookmark a page to use an ability and then turn the page to a completely separate ability, granting him access to that one as well, meaning he can use two stolen abilities at the same time. But if that's the case, he will have to use one of his hands to hold open the book. But either way, it gives him a ton of versatility, right? And so theoretically, or not theoretically, but technically, Chrollo is able to use up to 4 abilities at once. His book, his bookmark, a bookmarked ability, and the ability that the book is actually open to. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about which nin abilities Chrollo actually uses during this fight, and there are 5 of them. The first we're going to talk about is Black Voice, which is actually Shalnark's ability, another member of the Phantom Troop. So he actually willingly gave over this ability to Chrollo to use during this fight. And if you recall, how this ability works is it essentially comes with these nin antenna here. And if you're able to stick this antenna into a person, you can then control them via this mobile phone, basically issuing them commands. And importantly for this, there's only 2 antenna, so you can't control a whole bunch of people, but the people that you do control, you have basically complete control over, giving them very nuanced commands, if you will. So Chrollo uses this primarily in the battle as a defensive tool. This lets him get some space from Hisoka, because if he gets one of these antennae into Hisoka, he instantly wins because he then has full control over him. So Hisoka has to be very cautious to not get close to Chrollo if he thinks Chrollo is using this ability, because all it's going to take is one quick stab and it's game over. Chrollo's next ability is Order Stamp, and this essentially creates a nin stamp that he can use to stamp objects with, and then he can control those stamped objects with basic commands. Now, on the surface, this probably sounds like a similar manipulative ability to Shalnark's Black Box. However, it has some very important distinctions. The most important is that Order Stamp cannot be used on living humans, so you can't just go stamp somebody on the forehead and then control them. It can only be used on puppets. And that's because Chrollo is bound by the original user of the technique's idea of the technique or restrictions of the technique, meaning the original user of Order Stamp basically made it so that this would only work on puppets. However, it has a benefit as well because Shalnark can only control 2 people with his 2 antennae, right? Order Stamp can stamp a whole bunch of things, so you could theoretically control 50 different puppets with this. Chrollo's next ability is called Convert Hands, and this is one that uses both of his hands. As you can see here, a symbol appears on each that has an arrow on it. And if Chrollo touches somebody with his right hand, he is able to take on their appearance. And if he touches somebody with his left hand, he is able to give that person his appearance. And if he touches somebody with both hands, the 2 people just swap appearances. And Chrollo uses this one to basically confuse Hisoka. And this is one of the reasons he had the fight be in Heaven's Arena, because he is able to just disappear into the crowd and take on the appearance of somebody else, all the while making other people look like him to serve as a distraction for Hisoka. Now, Chrollo's next ability is another one that requires the use of both hands, and it's another one he borrowed from a Phantom Troop member, and that is Cortopi's ability, Gallery Fake. And if you recall, how this works is you touch an item with one hand and you are able to duplicate it with the other hand. And primarily this is used on inanimate objects, but it can be used on living people as well. The only thing is you're not going to create like a living, breathing clone of a person. You're just going to create like a dummy of them. And this is where Chrollo's first bit of ingenuity comes into play, because he is able to combine Gallery Fake with Order Stamp. He uses Gallery Fake to duplicate humans, and then those are considered inanimate objects by Order Stamp, so he is able to stamp them and control them. And it's here we can see the crux of Chrollo's plan take shape. This is also why he had it in Heaven's Arena, because he has a ton of spectators to basically duplicate with Gallery Fake and then stamp with Order Stamp in order to create an army to send after Hisoka. And then Chrollo's final ability is the Sun and Moon Paired Destruction. And as you can see, this is another one that requires both hands because it places a symbol on each of your hands, a sun on one and a moon on the other. And how this works is Chrollo is able to imbue that symbol onto something he touches. And then should a sun symbol and a moon symbol come into contact, they explode, as you can see here. So he put one symbol on the referee's hand and one on the referee's back. When they came together, boom. And this one is very important because it operates a little bit differently than all of the rest, and that's because it's been infused with the power of post-mortem nin. Now, normally, an ability that Chrollo has stolen will disappear from his book when the original user dies. However, the Sun and Moon ability came from an elder of Meteor City, whose only desire was to protect the city, and because that will was so strong, it persisted after his death because Chrollo is now an ambassador and protector of Meteor City. So the ability remains in Chrollo's book, and the Sun and Moon symbols themselves persist even after he puts it away. And just to be abundantly clear, because this is very important, Chrollo cannot have access to any of his abilities if he doesn't have the book either open or that page bookmarked. Meaning, in the Gallery Fake example, if he were to remove his bookmark from the Gallery Fake page and close the book, all of the puppets would disappear because that ability would no longer be active. However, with the Sun and the Moon, that's not the case. Because of post-mortem nin, as long as he gets these symbols out there, he can then close the book, remove the bookmark, and it's fine. Those symbols will exist forever. And the benefit of the post-mortem nin doesn't stop there. Because the sun and the moon symbol will never disappear, they actually make it so that the gallery fake bodies persist even after gallery fake is no longer being used. Because Chrollo puts a symbol on the puppet now lasts forever as well, just because of the fact that it has that symbol on it. So it's actually extremely broken, and Chrollo uses this to trick Hisoka, because Hisoka knows that the puppets should disappear once gallery fake is turned off. But Chrollo intentionally didn't tell Hisoka about the specific interaction with the post-mortem nin, sun and moon. So Chrollo is able to use that to his advantage and get off a sneak attack on Chrollo with an exploding sun and moon puppet on him. So all of this together just proves too much for Hisoka. He gets overwhelmed. And to try and briefly summarize all 5 of these things and his strategy as a whole, Chrollo is first and foremost using convert hands out in the stands to A, conceal himself in the appearance of a stranger, but also B, create strangers that look like him to serve as a distraction. He also has Shalnark's ability in the back of his pocket, Black Voice, where that if Hisoka ever gets too close, he might just, stab him with one of those antennae and the fight's over. So Hisoka always has to have that in the back of his mind. He also uses Shalnark's ability to manipulate humans to trick Hisoka. Because the puppets can only follow simple commands, Hisoka can know if he's fighting a puppet or not because it's like a mindless zombie, right? But if Chrollo is using Black Box, the person can do way more sophisticated stuff. So at one point, Chrollo makes Hisoka think he's fighting him when in actuality, it's a person that has been converted to look like Chrollo that is also being controlled with Black Box. So in addition to that, he's out there gallery faking all of these people in the stands to create dummies and then order stamping them and sun and mooning them to give them explosive sigils and then sending them in wave after Hisoka. And this just eventually overwhelms Hisoka. Like it's a never-ending stream. And at one point, he gets caught and his hand gets exploded. Another point, part of his leg gets exploded. And then he is just completely overwhelmed and he realizes he's cooked. So Chrollo was right. He had taken the steps in the game plan necessary to ensure 100% chance of victory. And Hisoka gets swarmed with all of these puppets, and then there is a massive explosion. However, Hisoka has one final trick up his sleeve. He decides to use post-mortem nin for himself, basically creating a nin contract where he surrounds his heart and his lungs with bungee gum and instructs it to basically massage and beat those things back to life after he passes away. And it works. His post-mortem nin brings him back to life. And that's not all, because he also gets an insane power boost from the post-mortem nin by enhancing his abilities. He can now use bungee gum to reconstruct his lost limbs and texture surprise to make them look completely good as new. And Hisoka's not messing around, because the first thing he does is goes and takes out Shalnark and Cortopi, neither of whom have their abilities because Chrollo still has them, but now he doesn't have them either. Because they're dead, those abilities will disappear from his book, meaning round 2 of Hisoka Chrollo is going to go way different than round 1 did. And given where the story's at right now in Hunter x Hunter, round 2 might be sooner than later, and I, for one, cannot wait for it. But I hope this helped explain just everything that was going on in this fight, because again, it's a lot, so it's hard to kind of summarize as well. But now, hopefully, for those of you that want to go back and reread it, it'll hopefully make more sense and you'll be able to put things together a bit clearer. But don't feel bad at all, because this definitely took me like 3 or 4 read-throughs to fully understand like the nuance of everything that was happening. Anyways, y'all, I think that's going to do it for this one, but I want to give a massive shout out to Lily, who not only donated for this video, but is also a YouTube member. So thank you so much for the support, Lily. And to everyone else, thank you so much for watching.